They appear from nowhere, as misty shapes or lifelike forms of light. We call them apparitions, manifestations, or ghosts. They're present in nearly every culture or mythology in human history, from Homer's Odyssey to the Bhagavad Gita. We see them too in present culture in our literature and films. But are they real, or figments of our imagination? In the Catholic Church, there is a particular type of apparition that has occurred thousands of times: the appearance of the Blessed Virgin Mary, the mother of Jesus. In some accounts, she offers words of warning for the world. In others, she appears as a woman robed in light, striking resemblance to the phoenix, the mystical bird of fire. This edition of Mysteries of the Church will look at the mystery of Marian apparitions. Are they of God, or are they demonic illusions? Can those who claim to have seen Mary be trusted, or do they suffer from psychological illness? We'll explore these questions and more as we unlock the mysteries of the Church. They are part of nearly every culture in human history. We find them as well in the Bible. Now, according to both Jews and Christians, there's more to reality than meets the eye. And yet, for both traditions, the conjuring of spirits has always been viewed as dangerous and sinful. Perhaps the best known modern-day apparition occurred in Lourdes, France. On February 11th, 1858, Bernadette Soubirous, a peasant girl from France, told her mother that she had been visited by a mysterious lady. While gathering firewood about a mile or so from town, she claimed that she saw a woman dressed in white, standing in a cave. The lady would eventually appear to Bernadette a total of 17 times. On her 9th appearance, the lady told Bernadette to go to the spring, drink of it, and wash herself. Only there wasn't a spring. Bernadette, unsure of what to do, began to dig in the mud when suddenly a spring of water miraculously gushed forth. It's to this spring that many people to this day will go and bathe in hopes of a cure. Countless sick and infirm people have continued to come here over the years. And while thousands have claimed healing, officially, only 69 cases have passed the Church's rigorous investigation process and been approved as miraculous healing. The most important Marian apparition that occurred in the 20th century happened in Fatima, Portugal, 1917. 3 Portuguese shepherd children claimed to receive a series of messages from Our Lady. Now, these messages became known as the 3 Secrets of Fatima, each having to do with a prophecy about the future. On October 13th, 1917, upwards of 100,000 people gathered at the apparition site, awaiting a promised miracle. Now, according to eyewitness accounts, the sun began whirling around in the sky like a wheel of fire. This became known as the miracle of the sun. In 1946, the apparitions of Fatima were declared worthy of belief by the Church, and to this day, it is one of the most popular pilgrimage sites in all of Europe.
An apparition in general, we have to situate it within something that we profess in the Creed, depending on what formula you use, particularly the Apostles' Creed, in which we say that we believe in the communion of saints. We believe that there's a communion between all who are baptized, and the Church is very often seen as this communion. And in this communion, there's exchange between the members. God, to communicate a particular message, will allow these manifestations to happen to certain people who have a very deep spiritual vision, trying to establish a very, very deep communion with God. And they are somehow graced with the apparition. We have to realize that the person manifesting himself or herself, most often the Blessed Mother, do so to emphasize a point that has been already made by Christ and that the Church will teach until the end of time.
In Hebrew, her name is Marian. In Islam, she's been given the honorific title of Siddiqa, which means she who confirms the truth. But what do we know of her earthly life? Now, we're here at Rutgers University to speak with Dr. Tia Kolbalba of the Department of Religion.
The most famous stories of Mary all come from the Gospel of Luke, who is the one who tells us the story of the angel Gabriel coming to Mary and her accepting the Lord's will and singing the great hymn about the glory of the Lord and so on. One of the saddest moments in the whole New Testament is the end of the crucifixion in John, when Jesus sort of turns his mother over to John at the base of the cross and says, you know, "Woman, behold your son," meaning John's going to take care of you now. And I think some of the greatest works of Christian art have had to do with that sorrow of Mary from that. I mean, if you think of the Pietà, for example, Michelangelo's is the one everybody thinks of in the Vatican, but there are a lot of sort of depictions of her holding his dead body after it's been taken off the cross. One of the things I'm struck by in the 19th and 20th century apparitions, Lourdes, Fatima, the Egyptian apparitions, is that they come out of periods of really serious social and political turmoil. And again, if we could go back to that idea of people want certainty, I think when she comes, she tells them, you know, that for the children at Fatima, I mean, their world is falling apart. Portugal's in turmoil. World War I is in full swing. She tells them that this has meaning. People are being punished for their sins, and it will be over, and someday things will be all right again.
And Mary came, appeared to them. I happen to believe that she appeared to them, and just asked, through them, asked the world to pray and do penance. People, I think, are looking for something that will tell them there's something more. So that when someone says, "Oh, the Blessed Mother is appearing over there," people will flock over there. But I think they're looking deep down inside from the spiritual aspect. They're looking for something more. They're looking for the divine.
Every tradition that I know of has some kind of explanation of what happens when you die that involves it having some greater meaning or that involves resurrection. The Egyptian apparitions are interesting for a lot of reasons, but I think this sort of image of these birds of fire that are around Mary, or that somehow are part of the apparition, are very interesting, because they could go back to much older traditions in which this sort of, you know, if you think of the legend of the Phoenix, for example, of something that can be completely burned up and consumed and then rise from its own ashes. This is an image that, of course, we think of as being a pagan or a polytheist image from before Christianity, but the phoenix is also one of the symbols that Christianity sort of took as its own, because what better symbol of resurrection is there than something that rises from its own ashes? But I think one of the most interesting things about it is that it comes out of this very specific fringe in Catholicism that, starting with Lourdes, takes the apocalyptic messages of Mary so seriously.
You know, when Saint Bernadette saw the Blessed Mother in France, you know, in Lourdes, and she went to report it as she was instructed to do, they wouldn't believe her. But as they looked into it, and it took a while, you know, people have to be patient. Yes, there's no explanation for this. The highest classification that an apparition is given by the Church is worthy of belief.
If you go to any of these places where a Marian apparition has happened, say Ireland, where a couple of boys saw Mary in a cave, there will be also a bookshop there that will sell you all of the stuff about the Fatima apparitions and the Lourdes apparitions. And they emphasize very heavily this apocalyptic vision, that this is Mary's last warning. It's all going to be over soon. Church authorities have always been very suspicious of people who claim to receive direct revelation, who claim to be prophets, and especially if they claim to know when the end is coming. And again, in the Bible, Jesus tells them, you won't know. Don't be waiting around trying to figure out when the end is coming. You won't know.
Coming up next, we will explore claims of Marian apparitions in a Bayside, Queens community that caused controversy and a major investigation by the local diocese. Stay tuned for more Mysteries of the Church.
We're here at St. Robert Bellarmine Church in Bayside, Queens, to learn more about Veronica Lucan and her alleged apparitions of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Now, to learn more about this controversial case, we'll speak with longtime parishioner John Rubson. We'll also talk with Michael Mangan, the founding member of the St. Michael World Apostolate, which is devoted to this message.
Starting on June 18th, 1970, Jesus and the Blessed Virgin Mary appeared to the seer Veronica Lucan, who lived nearby here in Bayside. And it really all began right here in front of this flagpole. There was originally a statue here of the Blessed Virgin Mary. And when Our Lady appeared to her, essentially asked her to kneel here, and that Our Lady would start appearing to her.
Sometime in the early 70s, she got these apparitions, and they had a following. So this went on, and they came from all over. In fact, people came from Europe, so forth, used to ring doorbells in the neighborhood looking for accommodations to stay, and so on. And it was pretty hectic. It was a big police presence there and so forth.
Complaints were coming from the residents in the area because hundreds of people would come by bus, a lot of them from Canada, to attend the apparitions. And they would not be ready with facilities, bathrooms, to accommodate these people.
The Bayside, New York apparitions are so interesting, partly because they're really odd. She doesn't just see Mary, she sees Mary and a whole host of saints, culminating in finally being spoken to by Jesus himself. She also does this voice box thing, right, where she literally is just kind of claims to be channeling the saints or Mary or Jesus.
Understand at this time, countless numbers of souls.
Due to the growing popularity of Bayside as a place of devotion and widespread public interest in the messages, the church decided to investigate Lucan's claims. The findings were released in 1986.
The investigation was to see if there was any merit to the apparitions, and I think the outcome was that she had a fertile imagination.
We took a trip to Bayside, about 20 of us. I saw nothing. People were going around selling, which is another aspect, selling so-called miraculous pictures. At one point in one of the messages, Veronica said, the Blessed Mother has asked, and she called the Chancery to tell us, the Blessed Mother has asked that a major basilica be built here at the site of the apparitions, which used to be the parish of St. Robert Bellarmine in Bayside. So the Chancellor said to her, Mrs. Lucan, we cannot build a major basilica here. The reason being is that the major basilicas are in Rome and there are only 4 of them. Oh, well, I'll go to the Blessed Mother and ask her again. Monsignor says, no, the Blessed Mother says, okay, a minor basilica. Minor basilica is a title that is given to a church outside of Rome and also in Rome because of historic, artistic, liturgical traditions and values that are maintained there. It's a very significant church. So, the confusion on the part of the Blessed Mother of what a major basilica is and a minor basilica is. All the steps have been taken. But again, sometimes people find it difficult to give something up.
Fatima, Lourdes, La Salette, Guadalupe, these are all approved apparitions of the Roman Catholic Church. The couple that you just mentioned, Akita and Garabandal, are not really officially approved, but there's a common theme and a common thread. Our Lady said here at Bayside to believe and see what happened at Garabandal. We're very troubled and saddened by the fact that there has never been a true, thorough, canonical investigation of the Bayside apparitions.
According to Bishop Francis Bagavero, then Bishop of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Brooklyn, a thorough investigation revealed that the alleged visions of Bayside completely lacked authenticity, and that the messages and other related propaganda contained statements which, among other things, are contrary to the teachings of the Catholic Church. But if the Blessed Virgin Mary didn't appear to Veronica Lucan, what was going on?
Our Lady is asking that we return back to sacred tradition, to return back to the ways of the Father, the observance of the Ten Commandments.
There was also always the prediction of a big event that was going to take place, a big manifestation, which never took place. If it were all like crazy stuff, you would say, oh, forget it. You know, this is not, it cannot be, you would make the judgment, it cannot be supernatural. But there's always elements of faith or of practice that will appeal to some people. You know, and also you're playing with people's faith. Maybe they were convinced that something was happening.
What is the mental acuity and soundness of the seer? Well, I knew her personally. I was in her home. I spoke to her daily for years. I was at her deathbed. I knew her personally. This is an extraordinary, holy woman, very normal, very regular. Is the messages in accordance with Catholic faith and morals? Absolutely. I've spoken with priests and theologians. They all agree. Some don't even believe in the message, but they acknowledge that there's nothing against Catholic faith and morals.
Under Bishop Mugavero, he sent a letter to the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith with all the information about Veronica. The head of the congregation, Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, who became Benedict XVI. A letter came back confirming the bishop's judgment. She had all these things written, all these messages were written, and apparently she would memorize them and then give them out.
The elements of it are all so stereotyped and so clearly based in things that happened at Fatima and Lourdes that it seems to me like it comes out of a vast reading of Catholic apocalyptic literature more than out of direct contact with Mary.
Coming up next on Mysteries of the Church, we will look at how thoughts of the afterlife play out in our modern culture. Stay tuned.
To learn more about our fascination with spirits, we're here at Rutgers University to speak with Dr. Angus Gillespie, an expert in world mythology, folklore, and legends.
None of us want to die. We all would like to be immortal. So having the idea of a spirit or a soul that lives on after us has been a comforting thought for millennia. In both literature and popular culture, when we think of the appearance of ghosts, we often see them as kind of white apparitions or kind of in a shroud of some kind. And this custom goes back to the bubonic plague. There were so many people dying of the Black Death that coffins had to be reused. There was no way you could bury a coffin. It was too valuable. And so dead people were covered in white sheets or white shrouds. And so that's kind of become the cliche, a sexless, without gender, apparition.
Should we be fearful? No. No, these are people who come to us. You know, some of the greatest saints had visions that were not exactly pleasant. The vision of hell, purgatory.
People have always been fascinated by apparitions because all of us fear death. All of us hope for some form of immortality, life beyond the grave, and the belief tends to reassure us that death is not final.
When my father died, there was one point shortly after my father's death, when my mother could not be consoled, that she said to me, it was very strange. I felt that someone came and embraced me. And that embrace was saying to me, it says, and I felt it. I mean, she's telling her son, a priest, and I felt it. And that embrace was telling me everything is going to be okay.
It all comes down to a matter of belief. The high point of belief was certainly in the Victorian era. This is when we have Charles Dickens writing The Christmas Carol. Ghost lore was at its height. Maybe spilling over into the early 20th century, there are the opening of doors, we have the clanking of chains, we have the cold spots, we have the apparition, the shimmering visages. Each of us in our DNA contains the ghosts of all of our ancestors. As far as scientific evidence, there are quasi-scientific ghost hunters, and they use all kinds of things like infrared cameras and acoustic meters. But I believe that the use of scientific instrumentation to determine the existence of ghosts is fruitless.
We have something inside that, no matter how much we want to deny it, there's something that tells us there's something greater than us, something divine. And if that something greater than us, whatever it may be, is manifesting itself,
and I perhaps may be able to see it, I'm gonna go.
It's very important when we are faced with private revelations or apparitions that these spiritual experiences be examined very carefully by the church. It's a process that is long and is arduous, but it is necessary. And the reason is to ensure us that these particular spiritual phenomenon are real and not merely the projection of some abnormality from within. So it's very important that when we deal with apparitions that we await the ruling and direction of the church as to whether or not these private revelations, which they are valid and worthy of belief. And most of them, all of them that have been declared so, there is a common thread that runs through them all, and that is the need for prayer, for penance, especially prayer for persons who are heading in the wrong direction and don't even know it.
Reports of Marian apparitions have been met with belief and skepticism. Out of the thousands of reported cases, very few have been approved by the Church, and even those that are deemed worthy of belief, the Church has made a point of saying that Catholics need not believe in them. According to Pope Francis, Christians shouldn't follow visionaries who tell us this or that, because the last word on God was the one spoken by Jesus Christ. Thanks for tuning in, and join us next time on Mysteries of the Church.